The night was cold, the air thick with anticipation. December 16, 1773. Boston Harbor became an unlikely stage for rebellion. Men, disguised as Native Americans, boarded British ships. They moved with purpose, their faces illuminated by the moon and flickering lanterns. These were not seasoned revolutionaries but merchants, artisans, ordinary men driven to extraordinary measures. With each chest of tea that plunged into the water, a message echoed: the colonists would not be silenced. For years, tensions had been simmering between Great Britain and its American colonies. The relationship, once mutually beneficial, had begun to fray as economic pressures mounted. The 7 Years' War, a costly victory for Britain, had left its coffers depleted. The war had stretched the British treasury to its limits, and the government was desperate for new revenue sources. The solution, in the eyes of Parliament, was simple: tax the colonies. They believed that the colonies should help pay for their own defense and the costs incurred during the war. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, each new levy tightened the noose around the colonists' necks. These acts were seen as direct assaults on their economic freedom and autonomy. Resentment grew. The colonists, who had fought alongside the British, felt betrayed. They had shed blood and sacrificed much, only to be burdened with taxes they had no say in. They had no representation in Parliament, no voice in the laws imposed upon them. This lack of representation fueled a growing sense of injustice and a desire for self-governance. No taxation without representation. The cry rang out from the streets of Boston to the taverns of Charleston. It was a simple message, yet it encapsulated the colonists' growing fury. They were Englishmen, entitled to the same rights and privileges as their brethren across the Atlantic. The British government, however, saw things differently. The colonies, they argued, existed for the benefit of the mother country. Their duty was to obey, not to question. The powder keg exploded on April 19, 1775, marking a pivotal moment in history. British troops marched on Lexington, intent on seizing colonial military supplies. Their mission was clear: to disarm the rebellious colonists and assert British control. They were met by a fierce resistance from a small band of Minutemen. Shots rang out, echoing through the early morning mist, signaling the start of open conflict. 8 colonists lay dead, the first casualties of a revolution. Their sacrifice would ignite a fire of rebellion across the 13 colonies. The British marched on to Concord, but the alarm had been sounded. The countryside was now aware of the British advance. From the countryside, farmers and shopkeepers armed with muskets converged on the redcoats. Ordinary men, driven by a desire for freedom, stood ready to defend their land. The British, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, retreated back to Boston. Their retreat marked a significant victory for the colonists and a turning point in the struggle for independence. The war for independence had begun. The events of that day would resonate through history, inspiring future generations to fight for their own freedom. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress took a bold and irreversible step. They declared their independence from Great Britain. The Declaration of Independence, penned by Thomas Jefferson, was a powerful indictment of British tyranny. It proclaimed the inherent rights of all men to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. More than just a document, it was a beacon of hope, not only for the colonists, but for oppressed people everywhere. The road to independence was long and arduous. The British, with their superior numbers and resources, seemed invincible. But the colonists, fighting on their own soil, were determined to secure their freedom. Led by General George Washington, the Continental Army faced overwhelming odds. They were outmatched, outgunned, and often outmaneuvered. But they had one crucial advantage: the spirit of liberty burned brightly in their hearts. In 1781, the tide of the war turned dramatically in favor of the American colonies. At Yorktown, Virginia, the combined forces of the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, and French troops, commanded by General Rochambeau, trapped the British Army under General Cornwallis. The siege, a meticulously planned and executed operation, lasted for weeks, with both sides enduring harsh conditions and relentless bombardments. Finally, on October 19th, after exhausting all options, Cornwallis surrendered, marking a decisive victory for the American and French forces. The victory at Yorktown effectively ended the war, signaling the beginning of a new era for the American colonies. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, formally recognizing the independence of the United States of America and establishing new boundaries for the young nation. Great Britain, the world's mightiest empire at the time, had been defeated by its own colonies, a remarkable and unprecedented event in history. The American Revolution was a watershed moment in history, reshaping the political landscape and inspiring future generations. It inspired revolutions around the globe, proving that even the most powerful empires could be toppled by the indomitable spirit of freedom and the unyielding desire for self-determination.